Welcome boys and girls, Costin here with a discussion about Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. I think Creative Assembly did a phenomenal job in terms of the Kislev rework that they released earlier this year. But, per their own admission back then, there are still things that need to be done. Specifically, what Creative Assembly mentioned was that they were looking at improving the supporter situation for Katrin and Kastaltin. The simple problem right there is that if you're playing Katrin, it is hard to get supporters with Orthodoxy. Really, because you struggle to gain supporters due to the fact that you don't have battles against Chaos for the Orthodoxy. If you're playing Kastaltin, it's the same thing, but just with the Ice Court. That is a problem. And it creates this balance issue on the campaign because it means that you're just going to be behind as Katrin or Kastaltin in terms of supporters compared to Boris Ursus and Astankia, which really just means that playing Katrin and Kastaltin is not worth it compared to Boris Ursus and Astankia, despite some of the issues they have as Legendary Lords, undeniably so due to their starting positions. It is just a much better campaign dynamic to be dealing with those campaigns. The power is there, the climate situation is better for them. There is absolutely a balance issue. Because Astankia and Boris Ursus have Wasteland, and Boris Ursus in particular doesn't have Chaos Wasteland as uninhabitable, he has it as unpleasant, and he even gains some benefits with it. So, various balance issues with the Legendary Lords, and if we look at Katrin in particular, her special skill line and her design as a Legendary Lord does leave a lot to be desired. Because she has, as far as Legendary Lords go, she has one of the weaker special skill lines in the game, or one of the least interesting. See, Katrin can be a good melee lord in theory. I mean, she has Froststorm, she has a Warbear, she could even be a Skirmisher lord, but she doesn't have this melee skill line to really make that work, and even her magic tree does leave things to be desired. Also, never mind the fact that getting Katrin's items, for instance, or Kastaltin's item, is actually harder to do than it is to just play Boris Ursus, who just like fights some battles in the campaign and voila, he gets his item. Not a problem for him. And that item does come in with a lot of money. So there's a power difference, there's a balance discussion on the subject, climate discussion, absolutely, with regards to these Legendary Lords. So the Legendary Lord balance is certainly not where it should be. Another big issue, and I would say the biggest issue with Kislev, is the design of Kislev as a campaign area. You have these provinces chock full of Legendary Lords. You have Kastaltin, you have Katrin, you have Frat, you have Azazel, and you also have Arbol, Archeon, etc. that are all going to want to play in Kislev. So you do have this massive concentration of Legendary Lords from the very beginning of a campaign. Kislev is essentially just too small as an area of the campaign map. Kislev and Bretonnia, in fact, suffer quite significantly because of this. Now, I understand changing the campaign map is not some easy thing to do, but clearly the Total War engine can support a lot bigger areas. We've seen that with the Old World mod. Though it would obviously take a lot of resources for Creative Assembly to do so, but I do think Kislev is in one of those areas where regardless of how good a race is, they're all going to suffer by engaging with this campaign area. The fact that the special cities of Kislev can be good, but they suffer from being in single region provinces is not ideal. That means less growth, that means those cities are less useful for any race involved in a campaign. You can put the Dark Fortress in Prague, and it's going to be one of the worst Dark Fortresses you can have, simply because of the growth situation. I mean, sure, you can argue also about the Brass Keep for Festus. Yes, though Brass Keep starts at tier 2, and Nurgle gets a lot of freaking faction-wide growth, so it's not necessarily the same problem. So, map design, Legendary Lord situation, those do affect Kislev, and I do think Creative Assembly needs to keep working on this to really put Kislev, and every campaign that has to deal with this campaign area, everyone could benefit from them redesigning Kislev as a location on the campaign map. Specifically, I think the special Kislev cities could really benefit from being in provinces with multiple regions as opposed to just single region provinces. That's one of the things I believe Old World did so well, because that's what you have in Old World for Kislev. You do have those provinces. These cities are part of provinces with multiple regions, and that means they're actually useful. Because having multiple regions means more growth, more economic potential. Commandments mean more. Atamans, in the case of Kislev, have a bigger impact when you're considering it. Now, Atamans are great. No complaint on that. I mean, look, a lot of the things they did for Kislev, be it economically, Atamans have been vastly improved compared to where they were before. Kislev does have a great military for the most part. There is one glaring issue, but they do have good infantry, they have good ranged units, gunpowder units, archers, crossbows with akshinas, magic users, no problems whatsoever. I do admit that things like elemental bears and incarnate elemental beasts feel a bit redundant given the fact that they're tier 5 units, but that's a relatively minor issue in the grand scheme of things. It is a bit annoying to consider the fact that if you want the Gold Knight, you actually need to construct a royal barracks. When, you know, if you control Kislev City, you have the Boca Square, which is more useful to actually buy than the royal barracks. Sure, more costlier, but it also gives you Tsargard. Or if we look at Kastalten, for instance, you can get Tsargard through this, but you actually need to get the royal barracks in order to unlock the quest for the Golden Knight. Lots of power available with the Golden Knight, undeniably so, but just these kind of minor annoyances do start adding up, stacking up, and creating problems in your campaign. Then, in terms of the military roster, going back to it, the one problem Kislev has is they only have one artillery piece, and it's only available at tier 4. Now, the reason this matters is not so much for field battles, it's for sieges. Without artillery, sieges are just worse inherently. Now, I understand why Lilligrom is a tier 4 unit, but what Kislev could really use is a tier 2 or tier 3 artillery unit. Sure, you can use allied recruitment to the Empire or dwarves in order to make that happen. Malachi is right there, so not really a problem. But relying on allied recruitment for certain units is not really ideal. It's better than the Empire situation, because the Empire has artillery, they just struggle with infantry. Having good infantry is so crucial. It's not because infantry are going to win you the battle themselves, but you build everything around the core of infantry that you know will hold the line. So you can use range, you can use magic, you can use fast movers to get around. And that's one of the key strengths of Kislev. Also one of the strengths of Cathay, strengths of High Elves and Dwarves as well. Even if you're playing a Dwarven campaign and you don't use that much infantry, well, your Quarrelers and Thunderers are certainly durable enough to hold the line while still dishing out a significant amount of damage. So, that is absolutely a factor. I think the hybrid units that Kislev has, the hybrid tax, if you will, doesn't end up working, and surprisingly the best units that Kislev has are not really hybrid units, at least not in melee, but it's really dedicated melee units. So you look at Tsargard, they're substantially better than Armor Kossars. You look at things like Frostworms, you look at Griffin Legion or Winged Lancers, they're just better than any kind of hybrid unit. So the idea of hybrid units can work at certain times, but not necessarily within the context of a Warhammer free campaign. Though, hilariously enough, Kislev actually is so broken in multiplayer, apparently, from what I've been told, that a lot of tournaments actually ban them outright. Of course they are, because they have this ability of Buy Our Blood, which means that their units struggle to break, and they have heavily armored units, and they have a lot of mobility and magic available on the battlefield. So, of course, they'd be. Now, on top of that, if we look at the supporter situation, I would say with supporters, there's something of a balance problem as well. Because, again, much better system than what we had before, undeniably so. But let me just say it like this. If you're getting supporters, getting something like 10% campaign movement range in your campaign is just going to be so much better. Or duties reward, replenishing campaign movement range, getting both of these is pretty significant in a lot of ways. Or every settlement provides growth and income for all adjacent settlements, for instance, or resource buildings have no construction costs. Like, there's certain things that here, in terms of supporters, are just so much better, especially the Orthodoxy. There's some things good, of course, in the Ice Court, but it doesn't compare. Really, the only significantly useful thing in the Ice Court is Ice Court Academia and Mastery of Elemental Winds. Though really, the Academia is one of those benefits. So yeah, some balance changes need to be made as well with supporters. It's something that adds to the previous point of Katrin versus Castalton. Basically, playing Katrin is kind of not worth it because she has the worst supporter situation when it matters. The Ice Court supporters don't give you the same advantage as Orthodoxy supporters. There's some good things, undeniably so, but it's the good things are actually available relatively early. So, for instance, let's consider, Theater of War. Okay, this is great, sure, but it's only 2 supporters. And then you get a bunch of things like that are not really as useful in comparison. Whereas if you look at the Orthodoxy, there's a lot of really, really, really good stuff over here. Plus 15 growth in all provinces and all that. So why would you invest in the Ice Court versus the Orthodoxy? Just an idea. Balance problem. I think it should be a real choice, not so much it's like, oh, we have a choice technically, but one is just so much far ahead compared to the other that you kind of don't care about it as much. Beyond that, research tree, they did update certain things. I think they could have gone even further with regards to this. I mean, again, there's certainly some power available here, but as per usual with a lot of research trees, there's just certain paths that are much better than others. For instance, one of the things you can do and one of the things you want to do is get Ice Court Discipline. That's going to be much better than everything else. Troll Country Pathfinder, Obla Scavenger, Cold Storage, Convalescence. Those just are substantially better than other things. And then other research trees just feel rather pointless. Casualty replenishment for certain units when Kislev has so many patriarchs that are at the casualty replenishment cap. Frenzy can be nice. Corruption, not so much. There are great things there, but there's also a lot of fluff with regards to the research tree that Kislev does have. And then there's also the Ice Court system itself. On a surface level, it sounds great. Oh, we can train our heroes and our lords to have really good traits and we can customize them. Until you realize certain traits are much better than others, and then you also realize how you can abuse said system, and you should. Because here's the thing in a Kislev campaign. You can recruit Frost Maidens for the load save character system from the beginning of your campaign. Katrin has a bit of an advantage since she can get 2, but from the very beginning due to ice sculpting. But that's roughly it. And ice witches, well, you don't really care because they're not capped anyway. So here's what you do. You play a campaign in Realms of Chaos, funnily enough as Castalton. You train a lot of these ice witches in the court, and then you just dominate the campaign map because you can recruit them from turn 1 as opposed to wasting multiple turns, 5 turns, 7 turns, training them. Why would you waste your time training them when you can get them instantly? And the benefits are ridiculous. Things like 10% construction costs, growth, speed, though that's actually not necessarily the useful one. But you can absolutely get a bunch of really, really good benefits like Glacial Blaster, Logisticon, so you don't have a campaign movement range hero, but you can get campaign movement range through Ice Witches and Frost Maidens. So you can get upkeep to an army, 20% campaign movement range, construction cost. Or if we look at a Frost Maiden, we do have growth, construction cost, speed, and Logisticon, 20% campaign movement range. Again, Kislev doesn't have a campaign movement range hero, so you do use this in order to make it all work. But yeah, it's kind of one of those silly things. The things that are powerful are so powerful that they overshadow any other choice, because any other choice is not really going to compare. Like, why would you pick anything other than Logisticon? That kind of campaign movement range, regardless of your playstyle, is substantially better. And this is not me saying that it should be nerfed. This is me saying that other choices need to be viable. That's one of the problems. There's a lot of modifiers Kislev has. And maybe that's the issue with CA Sophia, because they do love them modifiers. But then you realize that raw power is just that much better. And funnily enough, once you realize all of this, you kind of don't even care about hag witches, because by the time you can even recruit them, well, you are dominating the map so hard. Kislev does certainly create that, or Kislev embraces the problem that Warhammer 3 has, which is that inherently the early game is the most consequential portion of the campaign, not the mid game, not the late game. And when you realize that, and you realize you can just use the game system, yes, load save character is part of the game. It's a feature they added. It's not a mod, it's not a cheat, it's not an exploit, it's a core feature. When you realize you can use that, or even if you don't use it, that's the part that's really broken about this. Even if you ignore using load save character, even if you ignore the many ways you can abuse things, you can still end up in a position where you dominate your campaign because you win the early game situation. Like, once you beat Front and Azazel as Kislev, that's it, right? You've dealt with the hardest part of the campaign. With Boris Ursus, you can literally just rush Archeon and deal with him very, very quickly. Oddly enough, he hasn't been doing that much. And then we can go even further. I took Prague over here with the Confederation. So Kislev actually actively encourages you to take advantage of the game system to get a lot of power, because otherwise you're just going to fall behind. But whether or not you take advantage of that, so for instance, I just region traded to build relationship with Prague and then confederate them. But whether or not you abuse these kind of systems or not, the campaign is very front heavy. There's a lot of awesome, cool stuff right there, you know, elementals, war bears, etc., sleds, but by the time you even unlock half of them, you've long since won your campaign. Armor Cossars and Kislevite warriors and regular Cossars will just decimate anyone that stands in your path, really. Everything in terms of like abusing the game or exploiting things or anything like that, or just using game features, is just adding to that early game situation. But also, you deal with that early game, no one's challenging you after that point. That's one of the reasons why Astanka and Boris Ursus are actually better than Catra and Kostaltin, because they have a wider area of the map that they can expand without being limited by climate, for instance. But even that's not ideal, because again, the early game is so brutal, so hard, so, well, as hard as anything can get in Warhammer 3, that once you overcome it, nothing's going to stand in your path. That is the biggest issue Kislev suffers from, and it's not really just a Kislev issue, it's a game issue with the mid-game and the late game. And I do think Creative Assembly needs to improve on that. I think they've done a lot of great changes for Kislev, but they need to keep working on it. In general, they need to keep updating the game, balancing the game, all that. Balance is not a set-in-stone situation. It's a constant evolving thing. That you would never tell people in a multiplayer situation that, oh, the balance is good enough. No, balance constantly needs to evolve. And I think the core issue for Kislev and some other races is that Creative Assembly does a big balance change, a big rework, a big update, and then they ignore things for years. That's not how balance should work in any context in a video game, especially something like Warhammer 3. That's all I had to say. Questine signing out.